Okay. So we're moving on. To the board made one change. Don't know why I'm going all the way up. So under indication to transfer antepartum, and I believe, Silka, I believe that you can add some clarity here, more than definitely I can. Just added fetal growth restriction to the list.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Silka, take it away.
So the background, from what I remember from the board meetings that I was at, is that the board had originally discussed fetal surveillance tests and how the rule would be around that. And there was some discussion of fetal growth restriction and an assumption that abnormal fetal surveillance tests would include fetal growth restriction. But when that rule went into effect, in practice, there's lots of different definitions of fetal surveillance tests, and a number of definitions of fetal surveillance tests don't include like fetal growth restriction diagnosis isn't included in that. And so the board members that are proposing this, I believe, wanted to make sure that it's clear that they're adding this as an indication for transfer, separate from the general category of abnormal fetal surveillance test.
That is correct. I'm calling it out specifically than saying including but not limited to, and assuming that people know this one they're going to call out. Does anyone have comments about this? Feel like it shouldn't be here? Take it away.
So OMC feels concerned about the proposed addition of all diagnoses of fetal growth restriction as an indication for transfer rather than an indication for consult, because we see frequent cases where a fetus is given this diagnosis without appropriate attention to the race, ethnicity of the parents, and where there is marginal fetal growth restriction based on only one ultrasound. In those cases, it would be better cared for through follow-up ultrasound and consultation to see if the issue continues. Additionally, we're very concerned about the inaccuracy of third trimester ultrasounds and the high possibility of misdiagnosis of FGR. There's a pretty high misdiagnosis rate with FGR. And we're also concerned because people are generally using Caucasian or white-based fetal growth charts, which are extremely problematic for many families of other non-Caucasian races and ethnicities. There's research showing that using those growth charts, which are the standard ones in use, would result in incorrect diagnosis of FGR for normal babies in up to 15% of pregnancies in some racial and ethnic groups, especially Asian groups. So we think that an initial diagnosis of moderate FGR should be an indication for consult and follow-up ultrasound. And we're not sure that a rule change is necessary, as we think LDMs are competent to make this determination. You're muted.
Was it 15% of home births?
No, I'll say that again because I want to look back at my notes to make sure I get it. There's research showing that using like the white-based fetal growth charts, which is the standard one, would result in incorrect diagnosis of FGR for normal babies in up to 15% of pregnancies in some racial and ethnic groups, especially Asian racial and ethnic groups.
Can you send me whatever, is it a study or you just look that up? Can you send that to me?
Yeah.
And I can share it with the board, would be great.
Yeah.
Sarah?
I agree with OMC's recommendation, and also I wanted to point out that if this is an indication for transfer, that it effectively like disincentivizes following up on concerns with an ultrasound, because the ultrasound can give you an incorrect result, and then you're transferring care. And whereas making it an indication for consult means there's like opportunity for even better care and for learning in that situation. And also, you know, like the piece about different growth for different racial and ethnic groups, I was thinking about this, and like even if there was a note about using the correct growth charts, it would be near impossible to find reliable growth charts for different groups.
Anyone else? Nora, Willa? So am I understanding that at least P would go to consult? Would O as well, or just P? I'm not sharing.
Say that again?
Am I understanding correctly that P, you would want P to go to consult and O, or just P?
No, O is a very separate topic.
Okay, so is the recommendation from everybody to move P to consult? I see two people shaking their heads, and then we know Sarah. And Lennon. Hermine.
Move to consult.
Nora.
Move to consult.
Where's my list? Tanisha.
Move to consult.
Perfect.
That
That was
was
so
different.
easy.
Do other people have other things that they want to contribute to this, things they want the board to be considering about this one?
I think you said it brilliantly, like usual.
Okay, I will fix that later. And then the last one is adding PXA to the legend drugs and devices for maternal use. Is that right? Yes. Yes, so that would just be adding that drug to the list. Is there comments about that? Silka, take it away.
Well, I was gonna see if anyone else wanted to go first, since I've been going first a lot.
Look at you, or Nora.
I guess I just want to clarify a little more about oral versus intravenous, and yeah, a little more clarity of the next steps. If we add it, what does that look like?
Well, we'd be adding, the way this is written, it'd be under IV infusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is,
Which looks like it's not effective from all the stuff you sent us as well, but just wanted to make sure it was really, that was clear.
it's interesting that IV is definitely what both the World Health Organization and US organizations recommend. There's no organization recommending oral TXA for postpartum hemorrhage. So I have a lot of thoughts about this. This is pretty complex, and it's pretty complex in terms of midwives. What, you know, when we've talked to midwives about it, what they think of it as well. So most midwives who have been part of OMC discussions about TXA support adding it to the LDM legend drugs and devices, but there's definitely a significant group who have concerns about it or who are opposed. Our understanding of the research around TXA is that it's about IV administration within 3 hours of the birth in this really specific dosing where it's supposed to be administered 1 ml per minute over 10 minutes. And so we have a couple of different concerns. One concern is that those administration requirements aren't a great fit for home birth and birth center settings because most people don't have the equipment to set a specific IV rate. And we have a hard time finding research that shows what it would look like if it's not going in at that rate. We also have some concerns. It looks like it could be really useful in an urgent hemorrhage situation for reducing blood loss while en route to the hospital. But we have some concern that adding TXA to the legend drugs and devices without really comprehensive training around it could encourage midwives to delay or avoid transfer in significant hemorrhages that really require hospital evaluation. So our main input is that if TXA is added, it will require significant training for LDMs to be ready to safely administer. And some midwives very much do not want to use TXA and are concerned that adding it to the LDM legend drugs and devices would put them in a situation where they would be expected or required to use it as standard of care. And they don't want to see a change in they don't want to be penalized for not adding something that they may not have the equipment or training to use in the best way. So those are our initial thoughts.
This is Sammy. I don't think they would be penalized for not using it, but they would have to learn about it in the training.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing is like, for instance, we had the same concern when antibiotic prophylaxis for group B strep was added. And the idea is, that you're an LDM and that's in your scope of practice doesn't mean that you have to administer that, but it also does, it basically ends up being that administrate or at least offering IV antibiotics for someone who's group B strep positive does then become basically the standard of care, and you would experience in some situations some scrutiny to liability for not doing it.
Good point. So I guess, the Legend Drugs and Devices Committee is meeting. They're not getting into the weeds like that of how the training is going to be for each drug. They're more creating objective criterias on a more broad spectrum, and then creating a skills and written examination that you would take. But really it's based on these objectives that the supervisor is going to teach them. So the supervisor would have to know the detailed pieces of TXA in order to train them on all these other factors that you've mentioned. So knowing that, remove it. You can add some things here if you wanted to, some specificity here. So nothing saying you can't do that. You could give the Legend Drugs and Devices Committee a recommendation to look at it closer and maybe make some specificity around it in their qualifications. They could do a carve out of just that, they could definitely do something like that. So you have different options. Or you can get rid of it.
It looks like Willa's got her hand up.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Willa. I was just going on and on.
No, it's good. I just kind of wanted to say in general, I've been reading about TXA for quite a while and get the not daily, but almost daily updates in the email box from the AABC and things that are happening at other birth centers around the country. And what there's, everybody, I have not read one comment from the ABC loop of anyone discouraging someone else. They're just seeing great outcomes from it. And, you know, I think that as Oregonian midwives, we are seen as the great white light. and that might not always be true, but I feel like if there is another, and like, I think TXA is probably, you know, you're right, there will be a learning curve, like there always is when we try to add something new or change something. And there will be some people that don't want to use it, but I think adding it as an option, especially for, like you mentioned, in a severe postpartum hemorrhage transport from, especially as a home birth midwives, you know, kind of out in the field, quite a distance from a hospital, I think that this could make the difference in saving someone's life versus, you know, needing a nasty transfusion or, you know, worse interventions once they get back to the hospital from transport. And I think it's always a better plan to have more availability of medications for our means. If we can stop a bleed, I think it would be a disservice to all of us in Oregon if we didn't at least have an option to use TXA once it's being brought forward. That's all.
Thank you. I mean, I think from if I'm hearing this discussion correctly, what we're talking about here is whether this should be made an option that home birth midwives or the LDMs can carry. And then Silke's raising the important point, which is, does the availability of the drug create a sort of liability pressure to use the drug, such that failure to have or know how to or have gotten yourself to trained could then become a liability risk just by creating the option. The option almost becomes mandatory, especially if it becomes a community standard. And I guess a question that I would put back out to the midwives and especially OMC is, there are other drugs, right, that are you're allowed to carry, but not every midwife carries, right? And maybe even you'll have to tell me, is Pitocin one of those drugs, for example? Are there midwives on the more natural side of the spectrum who really want to rely on only the most holistic tools and they don't use pharmaceuticals, you know? And then we know that there's midwives who will use everything that they're legally able to carry. I haven't, in my work as a lawyer in the state, yet seen a case, unless I'm forgetting something, and really nothing's coming to mind, where a midwife was accused of negligence because she didn't carry a non-mandatory tool that some midwives carry and some don't. But I haven't seen every case. So I guess that would be a question. Can we compare this to other non-mandatory drugs?
To my knowledge, all midwives carry Pitocin. All licensed midwives, for example, and I think that you would be in a concerning situation if you didn't. I have seen some situations in investigations, some here and some in other states, where a midwife is penalized for not, inadequate response or delayed response, for example, to a hemorrhage, and the medication is part of that. It's never the only thing. It's like, there was a delayed transfer and they didn't, use the second medication that they had or something like that. But I don't think that it's, I don't know that it creates that. Like, I don't know that adding TXA creates that. It's more of like a question. Like, I want the board to be thinking really seriously about that, about like, when we add a medication, what does that mean? And I guess I want the board to really clearly define to itself what it means so that we're not creating the potential of being in that situation.
Yes. And so, I guess here's a question for you, Silke. Like, as you look down the current approved legend drugs for maternal use, are there other ones that aren't like Pitocin? Because you're right, even in states where midwives, like Virginia, their CPMs are licensed, but it's literally the law that they're not allowed to carry anything, which is a way that the state makes it almost like and they don't have a scope either. They can do there's no scope, they can do anything they want, but they can't carry Pitocin, which is like state mandated preventable death. And so the midwives are in a position where they illegally carry Pitocin because no midwife's going to be out there without Pitocin for a catastrophic hemorrhage. But when you look at the list of other drugs, are there others that not every midwife carries? You know what I mean? That we can bring that same question that you're bringing.
Sammy, I don't know if you know that you're still sharing your screen. So I think that there are some midwives who don't carry misoprostol, but in general, it's the anti-hemorrhagic medications that are the most where, because they're in scope, they are carried. Like there are definitely some people who, I don't know if I can think of anything. Everyone carries, anesthetic for suturing. Everyone carries vitamin K.
But not everybody does carry misoprostol, do they? Do
Yeah,
they, midwives?
I think that there are a few people who don't carry misoprostol. I don't know. Lennon, I see your hand is up.
I know a lot don't carry Methergin anymore because of the cost and because of the keeping it at the right temperature. So that's one that I think is a more common one. I mean, the cost is ridiculous now. So
The cost is really high for oral Methergin.
right.
Not for IM.
With the intramuscular one, it's the concern is for people that are doing home
The
birth at
temperature,
the temperature, right? So between those two, yeah.
It's not something that I at all have an answer about. It's more just like, I think it's important for the board to be thinking about. I do know that, like, since the Group B strep antibiotic prophylaxis started, having it has really changed what the expectation is around offering it. And, I know of only one midwife in the state who doesn't carry, one LDM who doesn't carry and offer antibiotics for Group B strep at this point. I guess, go ahead, Nora.
I just wanted to chime in that I think it's a great tool to have in our toolkit, and defining what exactly how it's used over what period of time or what the training looks like is important. But I think I'm in support of adding it to our toolbox, and people don't have to use all the tools in their toolbox, but having it along seems like a good option and safe for the future, and helps legitimize what we're doing once again in the eyes of people that would expect that tool to be available.
I think the main thing that the board needs to do, which I haven't seen in the materials for this meeting as much as I would like, is to look at what administration of TXA looks like with the materials that are readily available to LDMs, when we don't have like IV, what is it even called? The thing that sets the rate for an IV. It seems like it would be really important for the board to delve into the research that comes from some more under-resourced countries and countries where they're using TXA in an out-of-hospital setting, because there's definitely TXA use happening in lots of the world in an out-of-hospital setting, but most of the information that we're referencing is about hospital use of TXA. And I think we just really need to be looking specifically at out-of-hospital use of TXA. What's the correct protocol for that? And how is it appropriately used with the equipment that's available to most LDMs?
Are there states where midwives, out-of-hospital midwives, are carrying it and using it right now?
Yeah, Washington is one of them. And Lynette Pettibone, who's on the licensing board, is licensed in Washington as well, and has, I think, offered some resources about how it's currently functioning in Washington.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, thanks for coming in.
so
It's nice seeing ya.
where are we leaning for the board? Just to have them really consider what this could mean as far as people's level of education and what they need to know about dosing and specific IV rates, and that may not be available. Recommending to the Legend Drugs and Devices Committee that they do a carve out with more specific outlines for the specific drug, remove it altogether. What would you like?
I don't think anyone's proposing to remove it. I think it's more, what I'm hearing is a yes with attention to detail.
Okay. Do you want to do detail in the rule or recommend to the
No.
LD&D committee that they do a carve out?
Yeah.
Got it.
I think when things are added like this that are new, it's kind of like the process when the antibiotic prophylaxis for group B strep was added, where there was like specific, like everyone who's currently licensed as an LDM is going to need a first
Extra.
round.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, let me ask you this. We did do a separate 8 hours for GBS. Do you think that's necessary?
I don't
for
think we need
this?
8 hours, but I do think it needs a separate thing because it's an IV medication at a rate, which isn't the way we currently do any
Okay, never.
current things.
Do you think everyone needs those hours once and then just follow up every 2 years?
And then it's just rolled into the rest of LD&D. Yeah.
So you do think there needs to be outlined criteria for this drug, one time for everyone to know?
Yeah,
So
but I don't know if everyone else agrees with that. That's what
Okay.
I think on behalf of OMC.
Cynthia is here, who's running the Legend Drugs and Devices Committee. I'm going to have her come on screen. She may have some questions for you.
Nora had her hand up.
Hey, Nora, by all means.
Sorry, I can wait too. I just wanted to second what Silka said about a one-time, making sure we all know how to do it correctly and then rolling it into general education, continuing ed requirements so that it's not called out all the time, but it is at least initially so that we understand its differences. And a little bit of how it's used in hospital and at home or in other states would be really helpful. And I don't think it needs to be 8 hours. Like,
yeah,
I'm assuming it could be 1 or 2, but that's a complete assumption.
You're muted, Cynthia.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Murphy. I'm the qualification analyst for the Health Licensing Office. Excuse me if my voice is hoarse. I have been working with the Legend Drugs and Devices Education Committee meeting, and I wanted to know if you wanted to look at a sample of what we're doing in regards to the different areas. So for example, the IV therapy, to see if you would like to just have them included, because the objectives that they're writing in regards to the different administration and flow and so on and so forth is in there to be, and you could look at that and see if that's something that you would be helpful in making your decision today in regards to how you would want them to go forward with that. Or if you would like, you could, just as you had stated with Sammy, you could have a specific or separate area, or leave that entirely to the qualification committee and then bring it back to you guys. Just an option for you guys to have. I can bring it up on the screen if you would like. Okay. Give me a minute.
On it. Then come down here. Versus the T. Click on the big people.
Oh. Okay, is everyone there and can they see the screen? So basically within each of the different domains, the IV therapy starts out in section 4 and we talk about the equipment and supplies. And then now the names are here because the committee is still working on the content to fill in this section. We got a lot done under the pharmacology and treatment of shock. And so we still are working on this. And I can go from the top if you would like and start at the pharmacology. And that way you can kind of see where in its entirety we're going. I can get up there. So with the pharmacology, we talk about the defining of drugs, define legend drugs and devices, the action and effects, and then we summarize in regards to not having to do a section for each of these specifics, but they'll have to explain the following competencies for each of the legend drugs and devices. And then we go down into, let's see here, talking about all of the different mechanisms. Then the action and effects, describe the signs and symptoms, how an adverse reaction to a pharmacological agent is transferred, agonistics and antagonistics, defines.
And they would be doing that for each drug.
And then we would be doing this for, yes, for each drug.
All those things.
So it would be included with the list of the drugs. We talk about the tolerances, interactions, the
Is that
placebo
included in there?
effects, the compliance, the routes of administration, the placental transfer, the movement through the body. And this is, again, like Sammy said, for each of the drugs, this is something that they have to learn, and with these objectives. And so the TXA would be included in the list in regards to the pharmacology. And then when you get down to the IV therapy, basically it's going to talk about specific dosage and administration and I don't know, needle sizes and so on and so forth, and time frames, and so it just would go into more detail, again, just like each specific drug is throughout the whole. They work together, so it's not separating one out, it's doing each individual on a whole within each section as it specifically relates. Does that make sense? And I'll get down to that section again.
Do they think they need more than that initially for the TXA?
It's not so much that it's needed more, it's that this is about the initial legend drugs and devices.
Mhm.
And all the existing licensees already have their initial legend drugs and devices, and then are going to be having another medication added. So it's a specific unit on TXA is needed for existing licensees just about TXA.
Just like
So-
On time.
So yes, exactly. So what the proposal is from this committee is that instead of it being a 40-hour program that has to be done upon administering or your first renewal, this is an application requirement. So if this TXA is listed in this educational program, everyone would have to complete this, whether they're going to AMIC accredited, pre-accredited, BASTER.
No, no.
already licensed.
No.
We've already-
Two-
Oh, I see
two
what you're
separate
saying.
things.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Renewal.
One thing is just what you're talking about, which is inclusion of TXA just along with all the other medications in the initial
Gotcha.
legend drugs and devices. That's simple, and that works in the way that the legend drugs and devices committee is already working on things. The separate thing is there's 100 current licensees who are having, if this rule change goes through, a new drug introduced into their scope, and many of us never received training about it. Like I can say, I've never received training about TXA in any way, shape, or form. And there needs to be some way of making sure that when we have something added to our Legend Drugs and Devices, the existing licensees get that initial education just about TXA that we need.
Perfect. So what I can do at that committee level is take this objective and make it specific for the TXA as so it will be similar in the sense, but it will be for those licensees. And then, however, it's decided how that's going to play in upon obviously initial administration or upon your first renewal or how that's going to work. Just like the 40 hours used to be, it will be a specific criteria with objectives for the TXA in regards to doses, administration, effects, transference. And so that education will look in effect that's similar to this, except it will be for that TXA for those licensees. But in addition, adding it to this.
Yeah, and we're talking about something really short, like a, like a 2-hour session or something.
2 hours.
One time.
Okay.
One time
Perfect.
short.
Okay.
I have a couple.
All right. Did you guys have any more questions of me or need more information from me? No? Okay, thank you.
So, in thinking administratively, you'd want people to have this training before they start using the drug. Yes.
Yeah, Sammy, will you stop sharing this part so we can just see each other more clearly?
Yes. How's that?
Great.
Have the training before you start using the drug. That's an easy enough rule to write. It'll look similar to GBS. Of course, we'll have different hours around it. So in my thinking, we'll put, I guess we would just say, in order to do this, you must have the training. And once you have the training, you can do it.
Yeah.
That would what the rule would look like.
Yeah.
Like something like that.
But it would be a funny rule because anyone who's a new licensee, it would already be rolled into the LD&D requirement. It's just existing licensees.
Well, there is a gap because people who, we don't have the new LD&D program done yet.
Yeah.
So anybody coming in right now is getting old LD&D training.
Yeah.
So that's a little gap. I might have to think creatively about that.
I think there was a model that the group that happened when Group B strep was rolling out like that, where it was like you had an LDM license with Group B strep endorsement or an LDM license without, and that's so clunky.
I know,
but
I'll see if I can do it better.
I think that I don't know if there's another route. I mean, it might be interesting to see, and Lynette might know this, how did they do this in Washington, or how did this happen in other states when they were adding a thing, or also they're adding a whole reproductive healthcare scope to the licensed midwife scope in Washington right now. How are they doing that? How are they doing the rollout, and how does that look in the rule?
I can do all that, and I wrote that clunky GUS rule, so I'm sure I have more experience now that I can write it better.
The rule was clunky. It's that thing where you have people in different stages all at once for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure the rule was clunky though. I remember that. It was kind of mind bending at that time. So with all of this said, is there any more talk about GBS, or do we feel, or about TXA, do we feel pretty good about giving it to the Legend Drugs and Devices Committee to kind of develop the 1 or 2 hour program, me writing it in that you can use it once you have the training, and then I'll have the rule to mix everybody. Here's my concern. I don't know that I can have all of these things done by next Thursday. So with that said, I can have it done by the November meeting. How does the group feel if we didn't have rules until it would be January? It actually probably February 1st
I don't think there's any rush. I think it's better to do it in a way that it gets the full time it needs for consideration.
Okay, that really makes me happy. And
don't
I know that,
feel that way. That's just my opinion.
yes, please, feedback.
I think it sounds great. And I think and I agree with Silka. I think it is worth a little bit of extra time to do it all at once instead of do it quickly and then have to fix it and then have to fix it. And it's more work for you. It's more work for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I will, if everybody, and if people can nod or send me a smiley face, whatever. I will just talk to Kelsey and kind of let her know where the committee's at and where the decisions that you guys have made, and just, you know, circle back with her and make sure that we change that agenda and she's okay with that. I'll have a new draft rule schedule that I'll send out to you guys. And then we'll just clunk along. I'll clunk, using the clunk word again. I want to get with Lynette, get that information from you, Silka, if you didn't already send it to me. Anything that you guys have about studies or anything relevant, please send it to me and I'll get it to the board. I need to get this recording to the board. So they need to hear it. So it's a very short window of time to get all these things done if we had it for Thursday. So we can move it out to November. Awesome. I really appreciate that. And the board will appreciate that. So Cynthia has a question.
No, I have a comment.
Comment.
We will have to add an additional qualification meeting. We have them pretty tight line for the competency, skills, and written. So to add this separate piece in, we'll probably have to add another qualification meeting.
A whole meeting?
Potentially.
But you'll know after the next meeting.
Yeah, I will. But so we'll also have an adjusted qualification committee meeting schedule.
So, but I'll also mention that to Kelsey when I call her. Unless anyone has anything else, I think public comment, or does anyone have anything else about the rules?
I do.
Want us to, go ahead.
This is on topic, off topic. Definitely not a discussion for today, but curious how things get introduced to the rule, like how it would get introduced, knowing that reproductive rights in our country are changing and the governor has expressed an interest in having more people provide services to families. And I am out here next to Idaho and a long, long, long drive from anywhere where people could seek care. Is there any discussion on any level of including us in providers that would be able to provide first trimester abortions? And what does that look like?
I can speak to that to some degree. It needs to be in your scope of practice. And as of now, your scope of practice is you know, pretty streamlined, and that isn't included. So it would be a law change. In most cases, OHA doesn't bring those types of things to a legislature. It would be probably go through OMC to do that, work with the governor's office, probably work with people, me at OHA and other people. There'd be higher level rankings. But definitely, if you have these comments, come to the meeting. You can get on the phone. You don't have to come here and make these comments to the board. So it gets it on the record. It gets people starting to talk about it. It hasn't been actually brought up yet.
Okay.
But we canceled July and we had to cancel August because we have a quorum. So it's kind of new. So I'm betting it might come up at this meeting. So by all means, get on there and make these comments.
Okay.
Can I
Silka is OMC planning.
Well, I wanted to add something to that, and you could, it would be a good thing to talk about at the statewide meeting, but because it's not been part of CPM education, the way that it would actually work logistically is there would need to be a change in CPM education to support statute change at the state level. Because it would be very hard for the legislature to support, like to change a bill when you can't refer back to scope in the training.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of it's like a couple steps back. The CPM like finally has come into alignment with the International Confederation for Midwives standards around having some like full reproductive health education in it, but it's mostly about understanding the options currently. It's not about actually being a provider or administering options. And so that would need to change in the CPM to then support that and happening in the.
Okay, so it's a NARM thing first.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll, in my conversation with Kelsey, I'll mention that this came up. And so
Okay,
she
thank
knows
you.
it. I'm sure she's aware of
Yeah.
everything.
I just wasn't sure what more providers means and
Yeah.
what that looks like.
And were you wanting input from us now or earlier about fiscal impact and
Oh, that's next.
racial equity stuff?
That's next, but I wanted to just make sure the text of the rule, if we're pretty much there, then hold on here. So the next is fiscal impact, racial impact. Get my questions going here. There's a lot of questions that go with this. And some of it I can fill in, but in this situation, it'll be helpful to have your guys' input in some of these. So I'm just gonna go start with the question 1, and we look at the fiscal impact and racial equity impact based on the rules that are changing. So it's not all the rules, it's just the things that are changing and what would the impact be to midwives, the public, local and city, state government, blah, 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 small business. So the first question, are there any state agencies likely to be economically affected by the rule change? If yes, which ones? So I don't think so. So state agencies in my mind is HLO. Doesn't really affect us. We're going to change the rule and move on.
Yeah, I don't think so.
OHP wouldn't be affected, right? OHSU wouldn't.
It may have a fiscal impact when we speak. Well, no, it won't, because it's, no.
What were you, just tell me what you're gonna say.
Well, just
Because
current,
sometimes writing what it's not is just as
TXA
informative what it is.
like I was just thinking, if OHP is covering community births and then they're now having access to TXA, will that change their cost? But TXA is already a covered medication that OHP is already paying for, and it's a negligible number of, like it wouldn't, I don't think it would have an impact.
For me, it's helpful in case it ever comes up. Then I can say, well, da, da, da. And sometimes I write what's obvious, even though it's not necessarily impactive, but it says this is already covered. So
Yeah.
the next question is, are any units of local government economically impacted? I don't
Any
think
what?
so. Units of local government.
Oh.
I'm going to go with no. Are any members of the public likely to be economically affected by the rule change? So anything with the fetal growth restriction, is that going to change anything?
The fetal growth restriction, if it was kept as it was proposed, including it if it was kept as an indication for transfer, that would have financial impacts on members of the public because it'd be a higher number of transfers where people are paying for not only their midwifery care, but their hospital care. So that would have an impact. It'd be a higher number of people who would transfer.
And if anybody has comments, please, by all means, chime in.
Thank you, Sammy. This is Hermine again. On fiscal impact in general with these rules, I would just circle back to the peer review, which does have a fiscal impact. So, I mean, again, one of my concerns with, I think all the points were well taken in that discussion about the value of peer review. One of my concerns about having a more onerous requirement for LDMs than other provider types is that LDMs are the most struggling of financially marginalized, financially insecure of the provider types who deliver maternal health services. And so there's an impact to having a mandate for 2 peer reviews a year. You've got to take time out of work. Sometimes you have to travel, that costs money. as well as, of course, for any entity that offers peer reviews. There's a cost to OMC for organizing and facilitating these peer reviews. There will be a cost to the Oregon Association of Birth Centers. And there is a cost on the license type themselves in having to participate in them as a mandate, even in the absence of a Sentinel event, which I think is something that we didn't actually put a pin on in our earlier discussion, is like parsing, okay, it's one thing to say that you have to do a peer review for Sentinel events, but I don't necessarily read the mandate of 2 peer reviews a year to be limited to, if I have a Sentinel event, I have to participate in a peer review. So I just want to highlight the financial impact of the peer review requirement. Thank you.
Okay, I think I got that. So usually when I write something about a licensee, it's actually a good place is under 3, the public. Assuming LDM is the public, then I would write a cost to attend peer review, miss work, travel, all the kind of obvious things that could happen in
I would
that.
use it as in the category of the cost to small business.
Yeah, and it'll go there as well.
Yeah.
Because most LDMs are small business. You see how this rolls out. Some of it's redundant in my cost. Let me write this down.
I think we're all small businesses. I don't think even the biggest birth center is not a small business.
Exactly. I'm gonna add that too.
I mean, if you're talking,
I'm sorry. Thank you. The OMC is also a small business. OABC is also a small business.
Are they businesses?
I mean, they're organizations. And so to the extent that they are small organizations, and their budget is the dues of their members. And so when the expense to these representative organizations goes up as a result of a mandate like this, then those costs go downstream to the members because they can only be covered through those membership dues. So therefore, there's sort of like a direct fiscal impact and then an indirect one that goes through the doing it through the entities.
Good point. And then think about the dues in there. It's a very good point.
Thank you.
Be in there. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Some of these questions are redundant. I apologize. Can you provide
quick input?
Oh, go ahead, Heather, please.
Thanks. This is Heather Vogelsong. I just wanted to clarify and go back to what Soka was mentioning in regards to the rule on transfer, just to make sure that we capture those fiscal impacts. So the board currently interprets its abnormal fetal surveillance rule to include fetal growth restriction. So moving it down to an indication to consult instead of an indication to transfer. And so the impact there would be, instead of automatically transferring, with this change in the rule, it would be to consult. So I want to make sure that it's that impact that any change would be on.
Yeah,
Thanks.
the impact of that change would reduce costs to the public. But the current rule, fetals.
Right. In the current rule, fetal growth restriction isn't in the rule.
Yeah,
It's
not.
Abnormal fetal surveillance includes fetal growth restriction. For their interpretation of the current
For that interpretation, like if you look up a definition of abnormal fetal surveillance, it's talking about NSTs and
that's why there's
BPs.
clarification.
This is why this is there.
I think it can be added though.
So I think if we had those impacts, that would be helpful. And it sounded like Silke was saying that the cost to the public would go down by changing it to a console.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Can you provide an estimate, economic impact of state agencies? How much does TXA cost?
I don't know the answer to that.
I'll look it up. See if some of my counterparts can give me some information. Have you concluded the cost of compliance on small business, an estimate on small businesses? So we'll get the number of LDMs, the number of birthing centers, add the 2 associations, identify the types of businesses so that are affected, birthing centers, public insurance, LDMs, community birth just different types. So I'll add all of those. If other industries that I haven't named.
No, the main cost would be just the addition of TXA would increase the supply cost for the small businesses. So it depends on how much TXA costs, but it also depends on how frequently TXA expires. Because to carry something, you have to be able to carry it, continuously in dates. And some medications I can, low use medications I can buy once and then not buy again for 2 years. And some they expire so frequently that I have to buy them with great frequency and then throw them away and then buy them and then throw them away continuously ad nauseum.
A description of expected reporting, recording, and administrative activities required to comply with the rule.
It's mainly just, we have to add, like when we purchase, when we use, and when we discard TXA to our record keeping around legend drugs and devices. Around medications. And also the cost of that initial training for people who are already licensees. I like how there's 2 of you right now, Willa.
Yeah, there is. Oh,
You
you're
know what?
frozen.
I know. I was randomly searching up the cost of TXA and closed the wrong stupid browser. If you're interested, it looks like you can buy 10 mils of TXA for a price of about $4 to about $11 for every 10 mils. So
There you
Perfect. Estimate the cost of professional services required to comply with the rule. Can't think of any professional services. Unless you consider the associations of professional service could be providing the peer review. You can make that leap. Identify the equipment, supplies, and labor and increase administration to comply with the rule. Cost of TXA. And then, like you said,
if any additional IV equipment would be needed, because people are carrying some IV equipment for, hydration or postpartum hemorrhage, but to carry enough for this might be different. And I don't know if we would need any different apparatus in terms of the rate.
A description of how small businesses were involved in developing the rule. All of you are small businesses, so, and the board members are small businesses. There's that. You cannot estimate the cost of economic impact on state agencies, units of local government, members of the public. Does the statement of fiscal impact explain why an estimate is not possible? It will when I write it. The fiscal impact statement is sufficient to notify those who might be economically affected, to evaluate the position. Would there, outside of like birthing centers, LDMs, would there be other people that would be economically impacted that I should notify? I mean, I feel like that's who I notify, and then I've got some other people that I've been using, based on, I've been doing the CCOs and kind of including all of them and stuff now, since we have to do the 2993 requirements of getting communities likely to be affected. So we're trying to add more people in if they're affected. So I will make sure I'm doing that.
Are going to be required to provide these trainings, or not required, but if they do, just
The training for TXA. What? But I'll have to. Making a note. Are there any ways to consolidate these requirements? I think one, all the 2 different options for the choices, there's consolidation ways there. So we're going to give the board those options and then they're going to decide what way to go. The office requests your assistance in answering the following. So identify this. So these ones I'm going to read now are new to everything as of Jan 1. Identify what persons and racial groups are impacted by the rule. Who is subject to the rule? LDMs.
LDMs and birthing people who are planning a birth with an LDM. I mean, the birthing people aren't subject to the peer review rule, but they're subject to the FGR rule. And they're affected by the, not subject to, but affected by the addition of TXA.
What issues does the rule address? I can answer that. I can ask the same question. What racial groups will be affected by the rule?
Well, the main one that has an impact with that is that if the way that the board had proposed having FGR as an indication for transfer was kept, it would disproportionately affect, actually sent you the references again, and it would disproportionately affect Black and Asian racial and ethnic groups.
I would assume that the same people would be likely to be most concerned by the issues of the rule addressed.
Is now ending. Goodbye.
Same people would have concerns if they left it the way it was.
Yeah.
Okay. What other resources? So I think we got everybody represented.
You could also say in the racial and ethnic thing, you could say that Black and Indigenous birthing people might be most affected by the addition of TXA, because at a population level, they have the poorest outcomes around birth, including around hemorrhage outcomes in the US. So addition of another life-saving medication might be protective against those, for those communities that are having poor outcomes.
Okay, I think it has, please identify any unintended adverse consequences this rule might have on racial equity. I think we've answered that. If they don't move it, then all these things may happen. I do want to ask that if I have questions when I write this, does somebody want to volunteer for me to call them? Silka, okay. Silka, Willa for birthing center stuff, and Silka for community birth.
Conference call.
Be awesome. Okay, let's just. So I'm going to give this to the board. I'm going to notify them that we're going to push this out a little bit, just so we can have comprehensive discussion, studies, and make sure they can hear everything. And
Can you
then
clarify one thing for us, Sammy?
yes.
This has been confusing to me in previous racks. Does the board get access to the recording or just notes?
All of it.
Okay, great.
So everybody always has access to recordings, but with midwives, I always send them it to listen to because they always want to. And I send them the hearing. So yeah, they get everything. And the DEM board normally listens. They don't like push it off, but I want to give them time to listen. So I don't think they're going to be too upset with a couple months to stretch this out. So other than that, do we have anyone on the phone, Nate? No one's on the phone, so we can call this a day. I think we did good work today.
Agreed.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend or week.
Thank you.
Finish the week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone.